Welcome to our experimental first joint PHP meetup. We're sort of making lemonade out of lemons, so to speak, with the situation. See if this is something that we can do in February here in Canada, Ontario. The weather's always lousy and we keep canceling meetups. So we thought maybe we'll try this. As you know, I'm not really for virtual meetups, but Colin did such an incredible job last month. I thought there was good potential. So we're going to learn what we can and make mistakes and use those lessons to perhaps do this on an annual basis or more. I want to thank Vehicle for their sponsorship and Caleb for sponsorship and JetBrains. And I added my logo as well. Yeah, we got Buffalo, Guelph, Ottawa, Greater Toronto Area, York Region, which is above Toronto, Laravel, Toronto. Vehicle sponsor Caleb. Thank you for the giveaways, JetBrains. Please refer to yorkregionphp.ca for the agenda. We are recording, we're family friendly, but think about muting your mic at your discretion. And we have giveaways at the end, and Colin will be administering that.
So we're going to be giving away 2 licenses to any, so I know you've got one there, but KWJS threw one in. So we've got 2 one-year licenses to any JetBrains IDE. We're going to be giving away 2 licenses to Caleb's upcoming VS Code ebook and 2 licenses to Caleb's upcoming VS Code screencast series.
So I'd like all the groups to introduce themselves, starting with, I don't know if Rick is in with Ottawa. Anyone from the Ottawa group?
I have, I've struggled in, Bob, sorry.
Beautiful.
Usual tech woes. The camera software decided 5 minutes before the meetup that it just absolutely had to update. So I have no video at the moment, but I managed to get in with some audio. So
great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to have the Ottawa group invited.
Did you want to give a little intro about your Ottawa group?
Not too much to say about it, other than I think it's one of our usual PHP meetups. We've been trying to promote PHP in the Ottawa region, and the group's been coming and going for a long time. I don't remember when I went to the first meetup, and I've popped in and out of them a few times, and it's been around for a long time. Sometimes disappeared for short brief vacations kind of thing, and then we get picked up again. But we're here to try and try and promote PHP, share knowledge, and so welcome anybody to in the Ottawa region to join the group. At least right now with all the video, anybody globally I suppose could join and watch any of our meetups. One of my co-organizers, Savio, is on right now. I've seen him pop up. He's been heavily involved in the group now recently, trying to help promote it and get new speakers and new interests in it. So again, any of our members or anyone out there who wants to speak at a group again, now that we're doing video, anyone interested in presenting, we'd be open and welcome to that as well. So again, Bob, thank you for inviting us and organizing this.
And thank you very much. Sherry Wheeler is here as a special guest. Did you want to give a brief intro?
Hi, all the way from Windsor.
You wrote an article in PHP Magazine, which was profiled in the PHP Architect podcast. And then when I heard you were in Windsor, I thought I'd reach out.
Yeah, we don't have any PHP specific user groups here. So yeah, I seem to be continuing to beat the drum of PHP, and Oscar at PHP Architect asked me to write an article to that effect. I tried to target it at business focused people to sell PHP as something you can benefit as a business. I think it turned out pretty good. It's this month's free article, so you can read it online if you don't have a subscription to the magazine.
And there's a link in the agenda, and you're going to write an ongoing column.
Yeah, I'll be writing something kind of along the lines of the bunch of websites that let you do like a coding challenge and just for practice. So I'll be writing each month a different simple programming problem for people to solve, starting with something really basic like factorial and Fibonacci and the ones that we come across in interviews all the time. And then I'll try to migrate that to some more interesting stuff. I'm writing a couple algorithm related challenges based on game development and things like that to kind of stay away from the math questions we always have to solve. But that will come out each month, and then I'll present a new challenge, and then the following month I'll show a couple possible solutions.
All right. Thank you. And Nuno from the Buffalo group, would you introduce yourself and your group?
Sure. I'm in Canada, FYI. I met Caleb at Laracon one time and through Twitters. We spoke about starting a meetup group in Buffalo. And then Chris Trombley joined in, and the three of us started organizing that meetup in Buffalo. And then Jesse came along, he tagged along and became a co-organizer as well. Chris has been the one keeping up with everything and organizing. He's amazing. He works at Titan right now, if you don't know who he is. And that's pretty much it. We've been just doing it full stack, going all over the place and talking about a lot of things in the meetups.
And Colin, introduce yourself in the Guelph group.
Hi, my name is Colin DiCarlo. I am the organizer of the the GPUG PHP users group. We meet the last Wednesday of every month. And for the past month and a bit, we've been doing online meetups. So I hope to see you guys next month as well.
And Vic, are you there?
Hey, Bob, I'm here. Thanks for putting this together. I organized the Greater Toronto Area meetup group. So Bob works with me there on putting meetups together, and really happy to have this opportunity to participate in the online version. Thanks very much, Bob.
Thanks. And the York region is a bit of a greater Toronto area group.
Wait a minute.
Vic and I always make sure that there's no scheduling conflicts, and I got distracted. I figure we'll try to do a different kind of format where instead of just having a presentation, we'd have more interaction. Caleb is prolific in the number of podcasts and screencasts and speaking engagements. I'm kind of thinking we should assume a bit of knowledge of what he's doing. Just today, his Laracon Online presentation from last February was open to the public for free. I think it's laracon.net, but I'm not sure. It's in conjunction with the announcement of Laracon Online Summer, which I think we have 3 speakers here who are going to speak in August. So welcome. So Caleb, I have one question I want to ask you. Are you there?
I am here.
The one thing I haven't heard in all your talks is your connection to Buffalo.
Oh.
So I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, I was just born here, like a familial connection, geographic. I live here as well. I've never lived anywhere but here, so that's my connection.
You were saying on No Plans to Merge that you were going to be in Florida for 2 months.
Yep.
But you were normally be in Buffalo, and that's how I discovered you were in Buffalo.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, Buffalo. I mean, you guys are farther north than Buffalo. I don't know if you get as much snow, but it's pretty rough around here, like January through March. It's not as much fun as Florida. So we go to Florida.
We're 2 hours away.
Yeah, right. How is the snow up there though? Like we get hammered with lake effect. Do you get all that?
Yeah, we get snow here in Canada, eh?
You have the white stuff?
It's below freezing at night still. Now, I thought I'd skip my burning questions just so we could get to LiveWire and to Alpine. And if there's time after, then I can go back to some of these other burning questions.
The burning questions, I think, are probably the most fun of all the questions because they're on fire.
So you want to actually start with the first one?
I kind of do.
Because you mentioned this on No Plans.
Decide.
Well, you said on No Plans to Merge, the most recent one, you have to go about 38 minutes in or so. And you said you don't think for Laravel, you don't believe in Laravel events and listeners. But you didn't explore that.
I especially want to address this question because I flipped through the questions like a half an hour ago. And I got to this one and I was like, I don't believe in Laravel events and listeners. And all I could picture was Laracons and meetups and people listening to the podcast. And I was like, I don't think I ever said anything like that. I audibly laughed out loud. And then I didn't realize until you scrolled through what you meant.
I have the link on the agenda.
So I think Laravel events are great, especially the Laracons themselves.
Oh, no.
I know,
listeners.
I was joking. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was hilarious on my part. But yeah, the events and listeners, I also do not care for those. Not also, but yeah, I don't know. I guess the short on Laravel events and listeners, I'm curious what you guys think. I think this is interactive. So I don't know, chat is the best way maybe to weigh in on this. But in my mind, it's like, that Office episode, if anybody's a fan of the show The Office, there's this episode where Jim like puts a red wire behind Dwight's computer and like routes it to basically nowhere. And Dwight finds it and he starts pulling it up and walking through the office, following the wire. To me, that's like how I debug applications every day, pulling up a wire that's duct taped to a wall. And events and listeners are like if that wire just disconnects and I'm holding it and I'm wondering where does it go. That's like the oddest, goofiest way I can explain my hatred for events and listeners is like, where do they go? Like, what's listening to them? I can maybe find and, you know, do a global find for the listeners, but still, like most of the time, like if it's a, you know, a queued job, get it. But when it's not used in that context and it's just used to satisfy some idea of like, this should be an event that broadcasts and then other things can kind of opt into listening to it. I much prefer like M&Ms that you can just kind of follow and eat as you debug your code or, you know, understand it.
I don't want to start a big controversy.
Let's go.
I think they added a few events in the Laravel 7 just to make it harder on you.
Okay. Sometimes they're good. Most of the time they're bad.
And for the same reason, you're not excited about jobs?
Oh, I mean, I use jobs when I need work to be queued. That's generally there's so many people who use jobs way more than I do, but I try to just code like as simply as possible. Simply as possible, yeah. And then when I need work that the user shouldn't wait for, I'll create a job and I'll, you know, queue that job so that they don't have to sit there and wait. So I'm all for jobs, you know, sometimes.
I feel like I'm instigating
I'm sorry,
trouble.
didn't you quit your job?
I am not for jobs personally. No, you're right. That is so many double meanings. Yes, I do not like being employed.
I was gonna go into that about the last year you've had and that you quit at Titan and you went on your own. On your podcast, you talked about that quite a bit, but I don't know if everybody's familiar with that story. There's so many people on your mailing list now. I'm almost assuming everybody knows. But just in case, can you quickly go through? It's a very unique experience.
Yeah. I guess the short of it is I started working at Titan, a really, you know, a fine Laravel agency. I really wanted to work there. It felt like winning the lottery when I got the job. I didn't get it the first time, and then I eventually got it. And I worked there a long time, and it really is a fantastic place to work. But over time, I think I've realized that any job, I'm just, I don't know. It's sort of a, I feel like I'm sitting on like a half couch with a therapist. I'll skip the therapy part and I'll just say that I really wanted to leave the job, and not for any reason related to them, but I wanted to explore. I don't know. I wanted to explore open source and code for fun for a while, and I'd saved enough money, and I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I can live for a little bit on no income, and I'll treat it as sort of a sabbatical. And then after a few months, if I should go get more money, I can go get another job, or I can, you know, freelance. I thought that would probably suit me better. And I think like the day after that I left Titan, I started working on LiveWire. There, I saw Phoenix Live View. I saw this blog post about it, and it just struck me. I was like, oh, I should try this for Laravel. It's really kind of was right in line with a lot of the ways I'd been thinking for a while and a lot of the things I'd been doing and working on. And so I built a proof of concept, and people liked it. And that's it pretty much never ended from that moment. And that was probably like 15 or 16 months ago, maybe more. I don't know. But yeah, ever since then, I've been hooked on the project basically. And so I didn't make money for a while, and I would, you know, do like small freelance gigs to make some money. And now the GitHub sponsorship thing basically pays for a salary almost now. And then I still do some freelancing, consulting, you know, and but I'm able to work on these projects full time now, which is great. I started the GitHub sponsor thing because so I had LiveWire going, and I'd put everything into it. And like I said, I think a unique situation for me is that we live pretty frugally, my wife and I. It's just us, and we live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Yeah, so we live pretty frugally. And I was really into financial independence, so I was just like piling away my developer salary, and I was able to kind of live off a much smaller salary for a long time. So because of that, I focused on LiveWire for a while, gave it my all. I did, you know, I was like a door-to-door salesman with all my friends, like getting them to do little user tests, and just had this small following that kind of built and built and built. And there would be people who'd be like, we want to support you, you know, you should make a Patreon page. And so I wanted to do that, but I also didn't, I don't know, I felt weird about that. I felt like I'm going to create this thing and 10 people are going to sponsor me for $5 a month. And what's that going to do for me? It's going to do nothing. And I'll probably promise them way too many things. And it just never appealed to me. And then GitHub sponsors, well, I'd heard about it and I thought this seems really good because it's right on GitHub. I don't have to go anywhere else and I can set this up. And then I guess a whole series of events took place where I started doing that and got a trickle of sponsors. I set my sponsorship high at the time. $9 a month was the lowest that I put, and which was higher than everybody else. Everybody else is like $1, $4, $6. And I just felt like I need more than a cup of coffee a month. I need to like live. So I set it at 9, and I kind of changed the way my language, because really what I'm doing is working every day. I'm working for free for other people, not exclusively for this, but a lot of what happens is a lot of agencies make a lot of money off the backs of open source labor. And I don't think it's any like, evil regime. I just think it's the way that it's all unfolded is that, and now I'm experiencing it from the other end where I'm like, wait a minute. So I like don't make any money on this and I work on it all day, every day. And people advertise and make money off of it like way in excess. And they have these big budgets. And I thought this is kind of twisted. So I changed my language to almost be like, at my tiers, I set up higher tiers and said like agency, which is me being like, yo, if you're using my tool and you're an agency, you should probably consider this amount of money. I'm not looking for just coffee. So anyway, that was the GitHub sponsor journey. And I had a good idea for a PHP package, a Laravel package called Sushi. I tweeted about it and people were into it. And I thought, wait a minute, what if I made this exclusive to only my sponsors? So I did that. I thought of it. My partner, Daniel, on the podcast, he came up with it. This is Daniel's idea. And I immediately fell in love with it. I was like, you're totally right. Because we had a whole episode brainstorming how to basically make this GitHub sponsors thing work. And in like 3 or 4 days, I had like an extra 10 grand in yearly GitHub sponsors revenue, which was crazy to me. And it kind of showed me like, whoa. The people are willing to sponsor. It's like they need something, like I'm that way too. I wish I was not, but I'm not just going to go around and randomly sponsor friends of mine. That's just never been that way for me. So I did that. It was pretty successful. And people didn't just unsubscribe after they got access to the software, which was cool. And I guess one of the novel things about it was that after a certain threshold of sponsors, I released it to the public. So that was probably something I should have mentioned. Which was cool because it still feels like open source software, but I did make money off it. So there was that. And then we're about to finish up the GitHub sponsor story because it's getting exciting. I recently was like, wait a minute, I should put out screencasts. I wanted to charge for screencasts. I thought I always said like, well, I'll monetize LiveWire with a video course because that's the thing people do. And I was like, well, what if I had free courses or free videos on the LiveWire website and then a bunch of other videos that were exclusive to GitHub sponsors again. And I could use, GitHub OAuth or, social authentications. You could log in with your GitHub account. I could know if you're a sponsor and then you get access to the videos. And so today I actually just broke $70,000 a year in GitHub sponsors revenue, which for me is huge, which is like almost a full-time salary. I still do consulting on the side, but I think that's just going to keep growing as I keep kind of pumping value into the sponsor pool. So yeah, that's kind of my GitHub sponsors journey. It's really worked out.
You're blazing a trail. So could we get into a brief intro on LiveWire and then you can take some questions?
Sure. Is everybody seeing the slides and my face? Because I can only see the slides. Is my face like visible?
Do you want to present?
I mean, I could. I don't know. I guess I'm just saying that.
Your face is visible depending on how you have it arranged. So I can see the slides and your face. Okay. Unfortunately.
Cool. My face is like very tiny on my screen. I just wanted to make sure you could all experience my hand gestures. Really important.
And that beautiful beard.
And the beard that I'm hiding behind the microphone, the Corona beard, the wily Corona beard. Sure. So LiveWire, what is Live? This is my least favorite question. I never know how to explain it because it's so weird. But basically, it's on a broad level. A bird's eye view is someone has a question. Cool. At a bird's eye view, it's a package for Laravel. It's a PHP/JavaScript package, like a full stack package that allows you to build dynamic front ends, meaning a front end that does something without a full page reload, without you handwriting JavaScript. What it looks like, the thing that makes it look really weird, is the syntax is almost like you can call a PHP method from HTML. Like in Vue.js, if you have @click and then a method name, like @click update post, and normally you wire up Axios to fire an AJAX request and do the whole round trip and all that. With LiveWire, it's a similar syntax. Inside a button tag, you would put wire:click and then a method name, but that method lives in a PHP class and it gets called automatically. LiveWire is a wire. It connects the dots for you, calls the method, and then it does some interesting things. It re-renders your template and intelligently changes what's in the front end. So that's kind of the gist. That's like just the tip of the iceberg, but I think that's maybe a good introduction to at least the spirit of the project.
So who wants to throw the first question out?
I found what Caleb was talking about very relatable in the sense that kind of working that 9 to 5 grind, and it's kind of cool to see that he's escaped it. And so I was just wondering what he, like at what point he decided that he was, say, experienced enough, or like how much experience he had when he did this, or how long he'd been working.
I had been working full-time web development for 5 years full-time, and then a bunch more, freelancing and tinkering and just being a kid who liked PHP. But yeah, so I'd say probably 5 years of like full-time app development in Laravel. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a right answer. I'm glad that I worked at the first place I worked at. The first app I started in was vanilla PHP, and just like 3,000 line, no classes actually. The first app it was just functions, like old school. And so I don't know. I feel like I had a good variety of experience working on that stuff, and then I built like a Laravel Vue app myself, or not myself, but at that company, sort of like led that up. And then I don't know. And then I had I was able to work sort of in embedded teams at Titan at some bigger companies. So like it's some enterprise level stuff. So I guess for me, I'm satisfied with the experience I had sort of in the trenches, maybe is the word. Of just like dealing with really garbage code bases, legacy code bases, greenfield code bases on big teams and small teams. And I feel like I'm glad I had enough of that experience to sort of not take it for granted and not pretend that the world is all just open source, So and maybe that's my answer.
Yeah, cool.
But it's one of those things that I don't know if I would have made. I thought about this. I think about this a lot, that when I made the decision to leave, I didn't say, I'm going to strike out on my own and become an independent developer. I had to like tell myself, why can't I take a small break from, full-time development? I can do that. And that's what you have to tell yourself to start. And that's also what you tell the people in your life because the alternative just sounds ridiculous to you and everyone else. So it's funny that I realize now looking back, I kind of had this in my, like I had a gut feeling this would happen, but that's what I had to tell myself. And then at every step you keep telling yourself something like that. And now you think, holy crap, like I should have done this earlier. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think more people could probably do this thing than they think.
And you didn't have any projects in mind or anything, did you, when you left? No,
I thought I was going to read a lot of books, and I didn't read any books. I just got kind of hooked on this project. I had some open source stuff at the time, Laravel parental, better PHP units, some packages that I had built, but and I already had like somewhat of a blog following and things, but no real, like I'm going to sink my teeth into this. No.
Cool.
Yeah, good question.
Anybody have any questions on LiveWire? Any burning questions?
That's a good question. So in the chat, let me pull that up. Ahmed says, have you thought about making LiveWire JS code separate as a contract in order for other frameworks like Django or Rails to implement their own backend? What's the most needed pain issue feature? Okay, I'll start with that one. So this is a good question. Could there be a LiveWire for Rails? Could there be a LiveWire for Django? Things like that. The answer is yes, in theory. There is nothing explicitly Laravel about it, and because it uses AJAX requests for the communication layer, it's totally possible. In fact, you could pull down LiveWire's JavaScript, and if you honored the payload, if you did the right things with the incoming data and sent the right things back out, it would totally work. So it's possible. But basically, my answer to this has been and is still, I want to make LiveWire awesome in Laravel. That's my primary goal. It's what I know best. And it's the only way I can, like, thinking about that feels like too much too soon. I want it to be a fantastic tool with the current way of using it. And then if later on down the road, it seems that way can translate to other ecosystems, that might be a really cool opportunity. But I don't want to open it up prematurely, but it's totally possible. Totally. Let's see. So another question from Ahmed. What's the most needed pain issue or feature should be tackled on LiveWire, or only the roadmap, as the issues tab seems a little bit old and needs some cleaning? Yeah, that's actually true. So Alpine's issues tab, there's other people moderating the issues there, and I'm working on getting LiveWire people moderating the LiveWire issues, because a lot of it's just basically getting people to make their issues more reproducible and closing things that aren't actually issues. But as far as the roadmap, I don't know. I just keep working on it. I have some features in mind that I won't go into detail right now. Maybe we can go into detail later. I want to get through some of these questions though. So
You keep trying to get in.
Oh, really? Thanks, Bob.
Interesting.
If possible, can you talk about Nova dependency problem with LiveWire? Yeah, I'll talk about that really quick. So David Hemphill is the Nova mastermind, one of them, and he is dealing with date picker issues. Nova's front end is in Vue.js, and date picker issues with PHP date formats and Moment.js formats. He was like, wouldn't it be great if we could create a date picker in LiveWire? And I said, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't try to do that. You should just make this work. That's going to be crazy. And he said, I don't know, maybe I should. And so we paired, and we actually came up with a pretty cool LiveWire date picker that he probably is going to add to Nova. But then the next problem was, the way that Composer works, let's say that in Nova, Laravel Nova, they include LiveWire as a dependency. And let's say it's 1.0 right now. Then LiveWire comes out with 2.0. Now, a Laravel app that uses Nova and has the latest Nova or whatever, that depends on an old version of LiveWire, they can't use the new version because there's a dependency conflict. That's just the way the Composer dependency graph works, which is insane. It is kind of ridiculous that that it is this way, but it totally is this way. We talked about ridiculous things like literally pulling all of LiveWire into Nova in like a hard-coded file way. So that dependency doesn't exist. But our solution is basically LiveWire is really stable. I have no plans for a V2 right now. But if I do send out a V2, if we do tag a V2, it will be tagged alongside Laravel. So Laravel tags a major version every 6 months. LiveWire will tag its major version on that timeline if and when it has a major version bump. And that way, Nova is also on that release schedule. So if LiveWire comes out with a new version, the new version of Nova and Laravel will be released. So if you upgrade one of them, you will be upgrading all of them. So that's sort of the fix. It's nothing changing right now, but it's just kind of a promise for the future of LiveWire major versions. So Momo, Caleb, I've used LiveWire in a couple projects and I've loved working with it. Now I'm about to use it in a very big project. I saw your tweet the other day where you said you're in this for the long haul, but do you think it's ready for enterprise? I guess I would have the same answer as I would with like that Taylor kind of gives for Laravel. Not that LiveWire is as big as Laravel, but is it ready for enterprise? You tell me. The problem with that question is there's a million assumptions baked into it. So will it work on a website? And yeah, I don't know. I would say yes, but I'm not branding it as enterprise solution because it means nothing. I don't know. There's probably a better answer to that, but a lot of my clients and people, I know there's some people using LiveWire in a really big context. I use it in fairly big context. It works great to my knowledge because the underlying technology behind LiveWire is Ajax. It's not a WebSocket system that could crumble under a heavy load. It's Ajax requests, and you're already sending them, and you're already rendering blades. So you're already doing all the things that LiveWire does. So is it enterprise ready? I would say if Ajax is enterprise ready, if Laravel is enterprise ready, if Blade is enterprise ready, then yes, it's enterprise ready. But if you're hosting it on Forge, is it enterprise ready? A DigitalOcean droplet with 5 gigs? Probably not. It's, it just depends on the way you use it. That would be my answer. All right. Frake says, did you ever talk with Chris McCord, the author of Phoenix LiveView, about LiveWire? Are there any features in LiveView that you want to port to LiveWire? What do you feel is still missing in LiveWire? Do you consider it feature complete? I do not consider it feature complete. Not sure if I ever will. And Chris McCord, that's funny. This is another one I thought about, I think today. I would love to talk to Chris McCord. Why? Somebody call him up and tell him to talk to me. I emailed him a while ago and was like, hey, I don't know how to put this, but I have a project that I've like dedicated my life to that's based off your project, and I feel like we could talk for days. Something like that. It would be great if we could talk, Chris. Never replied to me. I don't know if it just went through the spam filter. Who knows? I should try again. In my mind, it doesn't. I don't know. LiveWire has diverged from Phoenix LiveView since day one. I read through the code base like twice when I first started LiveWire, but LiveWire has evolved independently. There's a lot shared between the two, and I do scan the docs every once in a while of Phoenix LiveView to see what they're up to. But fundamentally, Phoenix LiveView is different in the sense that it has what's the word? I don't know. It has a long living backend. I can't think of the word, but there's a server in the backend. That's how Elixir works. It's just a long running instance. And so Phoenix LiveView connects through WebSockets, and they have like Phoenix is built for that kind of thing, and Laravel's not. So that was a crossroads I had to. Initially, LiveWire was a WebSocket thing, and it did the same thing. And I hit this crossroad. In fact, I was telegramming Taylor, and I was saying like, I made an Ajax driver for LiveWire. It's pretty interesting because we were talking about getting LiveWire working with Vapor before Vapor came out. And he said, and so then we started digging around GitHub, and GitHub uses Ajax requests for all this type of stuff and lots of Rails apps and Basecamp. He's like, man, if it's good enough for GitHub, it's good enough for me. And I was like, I think you're right. We should just kill the WebSockets. And then another Laravel core contributor I did a user test with, and he said, he just like spoke to me and was like, get rid of the WebSockets. Big companies won't depend on PHP WebSockets. It's just a novelty. Move forward. And now looking back, that's like an incredibly good decision that I take for granted. To me, it's always been this way. But yeah, if it was a WebSocket thing, it would require so much more buy-in from users, where now it's like you compose or require LiveWire and you're using it. Yeah. And I don't have to manage you don't have to manage long-running instances and WebSocket concurrent connection caps and all sorts of things that we would have to deal with. Cool. So yeah, Frake. Well, there's another question there. What do you feel is still missing in LiveWire? Yeah, it's pretty solid. I don't know. I just try to fix bugs as they come. The DOM diffing part of LiveWire, that is the hard part. That's the part that I have to really dig down, and is really I just have to fix bugs as they come up because it's a very front end heavy thing. Different browsers react differently, so that's just kind of something that just takes time to make it a hardened feature and add tests as we go. And that's what we're doing. It's an ongoing journey. There are some cool features I want. I want like wire append so that you can do like infinite loads without, that you can do it right now, but like in really clean ways where LiveWire truly just appends DOM and is really resource light on resource usage. Those are the things that I'm really interested in, is how to make LiveWire faster, less resource intensive, cleaner on the front end. But honestly, there's like crazy things that I can envision, but I can't see the APIs and I don't know what they will look like, but I know they're out there. There's big potential for using LiveWire, headless LiveWire that serves JSON, and you could serve like, your LiveWire components in both JSON and HTML, whatever. There's lots of things that I think you could do with LiveWire, but I haven't done yet. So, I will say one thing, Frake, another feature that I'd love to port from LiveView to LiveWire. It's not possible because there's no long running connection, but Phoenix LiveView, like a year ago, they changed and used this strategy where they know about the initial HTML rendered, and then every subsequent Ajax request is just like the bit that changed from request to request. So their payloads are like way lighter than you could even do with JSON. It's ridiculous. But they have a thing built into Phoenix that makes this easy, and they have basically Phoenix is really, really conducive for a feature like that. And Laravel PHP are just not at all. So I would love that, but I can't have it. I was talking with Marcel this week because he was kind of on that board. He's like, how could we accomplish that? And we just don't really think you can right now. But that is one of the areas I'm really kind of always have my eye on, is WebSockets in PHP, because the day that becomes a really reliable thing is the day LiveWire becomes much more, much faster and cooler, I guess. But you can do a lot with it now. Okay, Momo. One specific problem that I encountered was getting 419 error when you leave a page open for a while, and there's no way for us to handle it gracefully. And that worries me that I might run into similar things in more edge cases. Totally. So again, LiveWire is under its hood is Axios, or the fetch API. So this is the problem if you have like a Vue app or any sort of app where the page is sitting there, but then a user spurs some interaction and it sends an AJAX request and the CSRF token is stale. It gets a 419 and things just break. But with Axios, you could set an interceptor and do fancy things. You can't do that in LiveWire right now, but that is on the roadmap, and it's a pretty easy thing to implement. But there will be hooks for both 419s and 500s, so you could gracefully handle those things yourself. Great question. All right, so Ryan Atkins. Hey, Ryan. Hey, Caleb, can you talk about LiveWire subcomponents and the parent-child relationship? Great question. Specifically, how data is passed down to children or back up to parents. Right now, when I have dynamic data to pass down, I have to use events and listeners to update data on the subcomponent. So this is one of the interesting things about LiveWire. So LiveWire is component-based. You can create these individual components. Phoenix Live View is page-based. It's a live view. It's like the whole thing. And because of this, I think this is the biggest trap that people fall into with LiveWire when they first encounter it. They take their the mentality of writing something in Vue.js, where everything is a component. It's the only abstraction. Everything is a component. You have a little input element, component. You have a big thing, component. When you come to LiveWire, that's not the way to do it, but you might think that, so you might try to curate all these tiny little components. In those instances, basically thanks, Momo. In those instances, my recommendation, or really the thing you have to train your brain, is blade components or blade includes. Those blade abstractions are what you should reach for those tiny little components. I guess that's the short answer. And then also I will say that a common pattern, I generally don't go more than 2 component layers deep, like a parent component and a child component. The deeper you go with that sort of thing, it's, you can do it well, but it's generally too much. And I don't think it's usually needed with blade components and Alpine and things like that. But what was I going to say on that? A common pattern that I use a lot is a manager component. So let's say you have a multi-step form, like a wizard. You'd have a parent component that handles the state of the wizard, like what component should be shown, what step should be shown. And then those child components, when they're done with their step, they emit an event to the parent that says, all right, we're done with this step, move on to the next one. Now the parent changes state, the child changes. So that is generally, that's a pattern that you can apply in a lot of ways. You could have a parent table component, and then each row in the table is its own child component. So I do have a wizard. How did you know? How do I know? I've paired with Ryan quite a bit on his app. So I guess that is my answer for nesting components. But I think people nest more than they need to. I think it's something that you think that you reach for initially, but as you progress, you realize really you needed a blade include or a blade component, and nesting your LiveWire components just caused you more pain. Yep. Black magic, some would say. All right. So thanks, Ryan. Fantastic question. Momo, fair enough, I guess. Okay, gotcha. Sherry, a second Ahmed's longer question above about making LiveWire less Laravel specific. Totally possible, and people have attempted it. I've gotten messages from people who've embarked on the journey. Anybody can fork LiveWire. I haven't put out a formal spec because, again, I'm not going to tailor to that right now because I think it would hold the project back and would be too much too soon. But definitely something that is possible in the future, and I think would be really cool. Great. So I really dig the SPA mode. Have you thought about also supporting blade layout components a la app layout with a default slot for SPA mode? I have. You can kind of accomplish it, but that's a great question. So what is SPA mode? I called it SPA mode in the docs, and it's become the name, well, because I wrote it in the docs. It's not a real SPA at all, but the idea is that instead of route : get, and then you return a controller that then returns a blade view that then includes a LiveWire component. It's a lot of boilerplate if your whole page is a LiveWire component. So you can shortcut it with route : LiveWire right in your routes file, and you can specify a component and an endpoint, and then it'll use your app.blade.php layout file. That's the default layout file for Laravel's auth scaffolding, and you can configure what layout it uses. But anyway, the question is, can you support blade components? So here's where that question is coming from. I'll say that I sort of recently encountered this myself. I was trying to do something with blade layouts and extends, and I was talking to Taylor about something that felt weird, and he's like, I just use blade components for everything. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, for layouts you use blade components? He's like, yeah. And then I just have slots for everything. So instead of having like an app, a base layout and then an app layout, and using section and override and layout and all that blade stuff, you could just use components for your whole layout that have slots for all the different parts and nest them, which is pretty fantastic. Anyway, if you try to do this with LiveWire SPA mode, there's no good API. I hacked on it for an afternoon with a client and didn't find anything great, so I kind of punted on it. Possible to do, probably would do it in the future. Right now, I just use the normal app layout stuff. All right, Savio. Hi, Caleb. You mentioned the project called Phoenix. Questions. Would you share the link? I will just say, go Google Phoenix framework, and you will find it as the first one, I imagine. 2 is and Google Phoenix Live View as well. You'll find that right alongside it. Is real-time input fields between connected users a use case for LiveWire? Forgive me, the question is naive. I never used it. I'm very curious. I'm guessing you're saying like maybe there's a WYSIWYG editor that 2 users are editing at the same time, something like that. Okay, yeah, if that is the question, you could totally use it. LiveWire works with Laravel Echo for WebSocket requests. So you could do 2 things. LiveWire has a polling feature. So by polling, I mean a set interval in JavaScript that sends an AJAX request on a predictable interval that you specify. And it'll refresh the LiveWire component on that interval. So you could presumably have 2 disconnected users. The same component is polling. When one user updates, it updates in the database, and the other component then updates. You could totally do that. I've used that for quite a lot of things. Yeah, Frake, that tweet inspired me to try it with LiveWire. Yeah, Frake is using polling pretty heavily in a couple things right now. Another really good way to do it is to use Laravel Echo or Pusher.js and Laravel's like event broadcasting system to push updates to LiveWire components. So that now you have really fine control over which ones get the updates when. There's no polling interval mismatches or latencies or wasted requests. So both are really good options. You reach for them when you need to reach for them, but yes, you can totally do it, and you can do it out of the box. Okay. Yeah, Frake post. Here's an example of how using blade components for layouts looks like. Yeah, so Frake's doing some pretty cool stuff with oh, Frake's talking about blade components for layouts. Interesting. He's not talking about that. Okay, cool. I'll have to check that out, Frake. All right, that was question 2 for Savio. Good question. Bob Bloom, we're going to move to AlpineJS. How long ago did he tell me to do that? Oh, 3 minutes ago. All right, sounds good.
You're on a wonderful roll. I didn't want to interrupt.
Move me.
I wanted to move on to Alpine. There's so much. You said on the podcast that it's like Tailwind for JavaScript and that it's rugged. So I want to know what that meant.
Yeah. So we'll do each of those things. It is like Tailwind in the sense, for precursor, Alpine, for anyone who's not encountered it, it's a lightweight front-end framework. It feels a lot like Vue.js, but you can do it all in the markup. You don't need separate JavaScript files, but a lot of the same syntax. You can bind attributes like a vbind value. You could do that. Like vmodel, you could do xmodel. In Alpine, everything's x hyphen instead of v hyphen. But it has most of Vue.js's templating syntax: x4, xif, xshow, xtext, xhtml, all those things. So it should feel very familiar, but it's very different under the hood, and it has a very different philosophy. So I'll start with it being like Tailwind, it being like Tailwind for JavaScript. Okay, I'm having a hard time not reading people's chats mid-sentence. So Alpine. Tailwind, it is like Tailwind in the sense that Tailwind, we went from like Bootstrap, where you have these classes, these component type classes, like a panel or an alert. And then we started using Tailwind, a utility-oriented JS framework, CSS framework, sorry, where instead of panel, you're now handwriting out in classes. You're composing that component with utilities. You're saying, I want this to have a white background. I want this to have a rounded border and a shadow and a margin and all that stuff. I'm also having a hard time not staring at that cat. I love it though. Okay. So that Tailwind shift from these explicit components to utilities that at first seems jarring. Whoa, You've made the markup, you've put everything in the markup. It feels worse in a lot of ways. It feels like you're violating separation of concerns, all of these things. But in practice, in your day-to-day working life, it's hugely beneficial. And you realize that when you need to make a small change in a style, you don't have to go to a style sheet and be really nervous and pretend you're playing like Operation and be really scared that if you change some little CSS property in this class that's used throughout your whole app, you're going to whack everything up. It's Tailwind, and you can just change one little utility in one part. So anyway, that's sort of this, that transition in Tailwind is the same thought transition from something like Vue to something like Alpine, among many other transitions. But the idea is that everything's directly in your markup. It's all in the template. So in Vue, you specify the data for your component in a separate script tag if you're using an inline or a single file Vue component, or if you're using inline components, it's in a script tag or a separate JS file. You specify the data and methods. In Alpine, you declare a component by literally putting an xData attribute on an HTML element. You say xData and then the initial data that component's going to have. And then you can, write all your templating syntax. At click, open equals false. Show, open, and now you have a drop-down component. I basically wrote it because in Bootstrap, you had drop-downs and modals and tabs out of the box. But in Tailwind, you don't. And in Balma, you don't. So when you're using these frameworks, you feel like, well, what do I do for modals? Well, I better use Vue.js. And then you basically inherit the world of a massive front-end framework because you needed to do a handful of, simple things. So I wanted to create a appropriately simple JavaScript library that was fast and small. The first version was 3 kilobytes. It's now up to 7. And that's fast and small and gives you the same declarative nature. I will also say that when I was building Alpine, before I built Alpine, I threw all the JavaScript frameworks away and I thought, I'll just write vanilla JavaScript. I'll even write it inline, like an on-click, inline attribute. So I went pretty hardcore and quickly realized that it's really horrible to write vanilla JavaScript because it's hard to write declarative vanilla JavaScript. It's hard to get data binding and to just manage the data in the template to React. It's back to the problems that we had with jQuery. So I wanted an appropriately small front-end framework that still had data binding and reactivity and a basic templating syntax. So kind of a long journey, but that is how it is like Tailwind. Point number 2, why is it rugged? So that's in the tagline is a rugged minimal JS framework or something. And I say it's rugged because in Vue.js, when you're using Vue, and when I say Vue, it's a placeholder for insert big JavaScript framework here, any of them. In Vue.js, you have a Vue component. That component owns that part of the DOM. It completely owns it. There's a virtual DOM sitting in the background, and there's a whole runtime. And when you change the data, it recompiles a virtual DOM, and then a patcher takes those changes and patches them into the real DOM. And if you manipulate the real DOM, and then Vue tries to manipulate it, it gets confused and it blows up. There's lots of things that blow up when you go outside of the bounds of Vue with the DOM. You're basically surrendering your HTML to Vue.js when you're using Vue.js. And I didn't like that. I wanted a framework that would be flexible enough to be used in conjunction with something like jQuery or your own date picker or a vanilla JS library. So Alpine is that way. It doesn't have a virtual DOM. It doesn't have any of those extra things. If you are into Laracasts or haven't heard of it, go to laracast.com. There's a series I made called Building Alpine from Scratch, and we build a 50-line version of Alpine that really is true to how Alpine works under the hood, and you get a really clear vision of how simple it is under the hood. So also rugged in the sense that it uses Mutation Observer for everything, for a lot of things. So if you literally go into DevTools and you like double click in DevTools and manually write in an Alpine component and hit enter, it will work. Alpine will hear the new element added to the page and it will initialize it. So I wanted it to be a framework that you could use with LiveView, with LiveWire. You could use it probably inside Vue even. I don't know. Maybe don't. Used with TurboLinks. I wanted it to be able to be used with all these things. So you had a little Swiss Army knife that wasn't greedy. It knows its place in your app.
Sorry, I was just wondering if I could speak, if that's okay. One question, and then two questions. Alpine, does it play nice with other JS frameworks? Like if I wanted to, say I had like a React or even jQuery or something like that, and I wanted to like migrate and bring Alpine in, is it a all-in sort of thing, or can I sprinkle it around?
It's meant to be the framework for JS sprinkles, which is kind of what Stimulus is meant for, but I didn't like Stimulus, so I built Alpine. But I think here's the way to put it. I think Alpine doesn't mind Vue, but I think Vue minds Alpine. So jQuery is probably works great with Alpine. But yeah, I mean, Alpine's not going to worry about Vue changing the DOM, but Vue's probably going to worry about Alpine changing the DOM. So it depends how your app is architected. So maybe you have if you have Vue components sprinkled here and there, you can sprinkle Alpine components alongside them. But maybe putting an Alpine component inside of a Vue component wouldn't go so well unless you use vpre or some like Vue directive that, you know, ignores some subset of DOM. All right, what is your favorite app to show off that's built with Alpine? Good question. I don't know. I don't have any like production apps publicly available built with Alpine, but I do subscribe to one of the Alpine team members has a newsletter that I subscribe to, which is hilarious because that's where I learn about everything that's built with Alpine every week. So subscribe to that if you care. And lots of things are built with it. There's a bunch of coronavirus things built, like a bunch of crazy things that I read. And I'm like, how did this happen? There's like some like helicopter emergency coronavirus unit in France uses Alpine for their entire like dispatch panel. It's also was just used in a coronavirus, a calculator for like business loans for businesses affected by coronavirus, built with Alpine. Oh, here's my favorite one, Tailwind Ui. All Tailwind Ui components are built with Alpine. So that's a good one. Adam drove out a bunch of the features for some of the features that he needed. And I was pretty eager to make them happen so that it could be used in Tailwind UI. Yeah, so like the transition stuff, I don't think would have happened without Adam needing a good transition system. So built it. But yeah, that's probably my favorite one would be the Tailwind UI. But yeah, I always hear more things that it's included in. It's, you know, it's exploded. It's only existed for a fraction of the time LiveWire has, and it's exploded like way beyond LiveWire in terms of popularity. But that's just because it's a small JavaScript framework, so anybody can use it anywhere.
I had another question. I'm just going to keep jumping in if you don't mind.
Please do.
Sometimes in our code, we have to do some, let's just call them interesting things to kind of like get the behavior that we want. And maybe like to make something like as elegant, sometimes you have to do some pretty wild things. Yes. Is there anything that kind of stands out in your head about the Alpine code, like where maybe some bodies might be buried or something like that you wouldn't like
like about? In an Alpine's code base?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. What would be a good one? There are for sure. Oh, I mean, the transition system is like extremely complex. Okay, here's just a like ridiculously complex part of the system. The X4, yeah. There are a couple. The transition system, it is smart enough. So Vue doesn't work like this, but if you have a parent that's transitioning, like let's say you have a modal where the overlay has a transition to fade in and out, and then the modal itself does like a scale in, but you don't want the background to do a scale. So you have independent transitions on nested elements. If you have both of those transitions beneath a more parent level that has an XShow won't honor the length of its children's transitions. So it'll just do a hard snap and kill the whole tree. So you can kind of fake this behavior in Vue and in Alpine. You used to have to do this in Alpine where you would have like a benign transition that waits the same length of everything beneath it. But Alpine is smart enough where it keeps a nested promise tree of all of the transitions in a like a parent-child tree interconnected, and recursively resolves them with like a promise.all in a dot reduce that's in a chain, and it makes it all work. And it took me like days of banging my head against the wall. That was one that was like ridiculous and crazy. Yeah. And then somebody mentioned X4. So everything in Alpine's like pretty straightforward in terms of the templating stuff, except for X4. Very odd part of the system, because if you think about it, in Vue has the benefit of a virtual DOM where it can keep track of like how many things are in the iteration and when they're not, and all this stuff. And Alpine doesn't have that. So you put the element you want to X4 in a template tag, and then Alpine loops through and appends elements to that template element and stores like a key on each of them right in the DOM element and their values, and that like helps with the scoping, whatever. It's stupid and crazy. There are definitely some buried bodies in the Alpine code base, but it's pretty small. It's still like 7 kilobytes, and I think V3 is going to be even smaller. Good question, Colin. Fun question.
That's great. That was an awesome answer. Thank you very much for that.
Nice. Sweet.
Can I ask, how much of your time do you spend on LiveWire versus Alpine?
It changes all the time, but it's pretty much, it levels out. I do a lot of LiveWire consulting, and I don't do much Alpine consulting, probably because it's just a simple tool. So I don't think anybody's paid me for Alpine consulting ever, and that is very different than LiveWire. So I guess for that reason, I'd say more LiveWire for sure. LiveWire took way longer to build, like a million times longer. Because I'd already built Alpine in LiveWire. LiveWire is also a front-end framework, so I already like knew how to walk DOM and update things and whatever. So so I'll say that more LiveWire than Alpine for sure. But I meet with a little team for each of the projects every other week. So I have like a cadence of addressing issues and features on both of them continuously. So I'm always working on both of them. Pretty much every day, I'm at least looking at both of them. But a LiveWire gets more work than Alpine for sure.
Okay. I was actually kind of wondering, because I find like if you don't want to do an SPA, which I think in a lot of cases we shouldn't, because it's kind of complicated for a lot of web pages, Alpine really hits the sweet spot, right? Like instead of going all the way back to jQuery, where you sort of have to wire this up yourself, being able to do it declaratively is just absolutely brilliant. But I think I stumbled across it. I can't remember if it was December or January this year. And I think in a podcast, it sounded like you guys made a joke that you don't want to promote this. Like you don't want to get like AlpineJS.com. And I remember checking at the time and nobody had grabbed the domain yet. Although I checked it right now and I noticed somebody grabbed it. Is there plans to kind of push this a little bit more than just GitHub?
Yes, there is. So Alpine is something I'm sitting on. It's the anti-project for me. Like everything I did in LiveWire, I did to the max. And Alpine was just a good idea at the right time, and it took off on its own. And I wanted people to beg me to like make it more official, rather than like with LiveWire, I was begging everyone else. I had to like really like walk uphill with LiveWire until people started to get it. It was a really hard sell. That now has taken on and taken off, and people now understand it. But with Alpine, it was the opposite. So maybe it's just some weird like mood I'm in, that I just like the fact that it almost underrepresents its own potential in the JavaScript ecosystem. So I don't know. And I learned my lesson hard on like the minute you put out a doc site, like fixing a doc, it's the README is all there is right now. And people just send PRs to fix it. It's super easy. I fix it easily. When I add a feature, it's cake for me. I don't have to bundle any website. I don't have to sit there and design pixels. I don't have to do any of that stuff. And I love that. But I will say that I think it has way more potential than I'm allowing it to live up to right now. And in my mind, I'm just taking my time. Like I know that it's going to have an awesome representation. It's going to have a beautiful site that I'm going to be very happy with. And it'll be on its own domain, and it'll have its own screencast series, and the docs will be great. And there'll be tons of examples, and it'll be a big boy project. But it's almost like you have a kid. You know how parents like I'm not a parent, but you ruminate on your kids, like just enjoy this time while they're young. That's what I'm doing with Alpine. I'm just enjoying it while it's young, before it's this thing that tries that rebels, as a rebellious teenager.
Yeah, so I regret I didn't grab the domain name myself. Did you guys grab the domain name?
I did.
Or do you know who grabbed it?
I wish I knew. I really hope that I had the foresight to grab it and then I just forgot. But it's possible that I don't have it.
I was about to grab it, and then I saw your podcast where you joked, we really don't want to do this.
I was really hoping that you were leading with that to then tell me, Caleb, I have it.
No,
and I'm holding it for you. It's like, for a small fee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. All right, 2 a.m. for Frake. Thanks for hanging, Frake. Ryan, can you talk about how variables methods defined in Xdata are scoped to the rest of the page, window, or other Alpine components? Okay, so I mean, right now in an Alpine component, the data inside Xdata is scoped to everything beneath it. Unless you nest another component, then it has its own scope. V3 of Alpine, the scopes will be inherited from their parents, like functions in JavaScript. It'll just be inherent. For people who are not following me, if you have a Alpine component with Xdata open equals true, and it's like a drop-down component, if inside of it you have another little Alpine component, in V3 you'll be able to access open and make it true or false and react to it from inside that component. Right now you can't. Each component is its own island. But that's coming to V3, so that's going to happen. All right, Astrid, do you think it is wise idea to make 700 CSS icons as components with LiveWire? I'm wondering if you're joking or not. I don't want to insult you if you're not. I do not think it's a wise idea. I think Blade components or Blade includes are definitely the way to go for that. Reason for that is to make the life easier for the community, since there's a React version for CSS.gg, but not if I... Yeah, the thing that's going to be tough is getting people to shake their notions about React and Vue and bringing those to LiveWire, thinking components should be, small and isolated. And that's not the case with LiveWire because there's performance implications. Clayton says Project X lol. Again, Clayton, I don't know if this is a joke, but I don't know if it's a question that I should be answering, but Project X was the first name of... Oh, he's probably saying... Alpine started out without a name even. I was like, I'm not going to get hung up on any branding, anything. And I called it Project X for a long time.
Should we move on to VS Code?
Yeah, so VS Code. This is another accidental thing. I didn't think that I was a VS Code thought leader at all. I've just been using it for a long time, and I built a couple popular extensions for it. And I've been pretty obsessed with making it as minimal and clean and nice as possible, just because I'm a developer and that's, I don't know, what we like to do. And I tweeted out a screenshot of my VS Code setup because I finally got it to be full bleed. Yeah, I'll put this in the chat right now because I don't know if it's easier than sharing my screen or not, but I'll just post this in the chat on learnvscode.com. I did buy that domain name. So learnvscode.com. It's kind of the pitch for this basically, but the concept is that Sublime is like a work of art, but there's so many things in Sublime that I refuse to go back to, like not having a terminal built in. Like the global find is ridiculous in Sublime. I hate it so much. The sidebar is really annoying. You can't drag files. The IntelliSense is really bad. There's just so many things in Sublime that the editing experience is just sublime, but it just sucks in a lot of other ways for me. And VS Code felt like a good balance. Like PHP Storm, I tried that for a while. I know a lot of people are really into it. I respect it. I think there's an alternate universe where I'm hugely into PHP Storm. That is not this universe. It is overkill for me. It makes my fan crazy, and I like a text editor. And I do a lot of JavaScript, and I know PHP Storm's good at JavaScript too, but whatever. So I tweeted this out, and people dug it and were like, send your configuration, post your config file. I was like, I don't want to just post my config file, have 5 or 10 or 20 people tweak it and pull it down and wade through it and make it sort of like mine. I want to do something more curated, something more of a narrative, something more well thought out. So I threw up this landing page, this learnvscode.com landing page in a couple days, and started an email list. And every week on Tuesday, I started emailing, and I put a lot of effort into it. I didn't think I would, but the first one, I really put effort into it, and everyone since, I put a lot of effort into them, and basically tackled like my philosophy behind using VS Code. It's not meant to be a here's how to use VS Code for beginners. It's meant to be a here is a VS Code, here's a philosophy to code editors and shortcut keys. Here's my workflow, and I want to impart it to you so that you can either adopt it or challenge your own workflow. And as I've been writing it, I've been thinking even harder about all this stuff and researching even more things about VS Code to make it better. So if you use VS Code or you want to use it, I highly recommend signing up. And yeah, like I said, I'm trying to tackle all the things. Getting PHP working in VS Code is a little bit disjointed and needs a little bit of guidance, and that's what I want to do as well. So if you're a PHP developer, I imagine you are, I feel like I'm pretty happy with my setup. I have IntelliSense, I have automatic imports, I have the test runner, better PHP unit that I made a while ago. I have Xdebug set up with step debugging. I can go to definition. I can global symbol search, all the stuff that you want out of an editor. I get parameter hints and things like that, but this editor is still clean and it doesn't feel like Times Square. So I'm putting a lot of effort into it. I write every day for the ebook and turning it into an ebook and a screencast course. Better PHP unit, yeah. And I'm writing a bunch of other extensions in the meantime because I'm finding even more things I want answered that aren't answered. So I'll have kind of an extension suite to go along with it. But yeah, I guess that's the intro to it. I guess anybody can ask questions. I don't know if people have like loaded questions like they do for Alpine or LiveWire, but that's my intro at least.
What do you mean by better PHP unit? Like Bob's got in here that there might be a demo. Is there a way to see what you're talking about?
So when I came to VS Code, I wanted a way to easily backing up. When I was in Sublime, Adam Wathen and David Hemphill made a plugin for Sublime for PHP unit where your cursor was in a test, and you hit like Command KR or some keyboard shortcut, and it would open up a terminal and it would fill in that PHP unit command with that filter for that method and run it. And it was great. And I got addicted to it. And then I came to VS Code and the existing plugin was way too heavy. I don't think it detected where your cursor was. It was very like GUI oriented. You had to like right click on the test, stuff like that, which is kind of a deal breaker for me. And then there was another one that was faster and better, but it didn't have colors. I was like, what's a passing test if it's not green? That's just not good at all or satisfying in any way. So I kind of set out to create a test runner that was fast, didn't hijack your terminal, had colors, and you could just run with shortcut keys from where your cursor is. So I wrote better PHP unit. It actually uses kind of a novel technique that I haven't really seen any other package use. It's not like unbelievably smart or anything. It's just I tried everything to get colors, and I found a way in extensions to run your test and get colors and not hijack your terminal using tasks if anybody's into VS Code hackery. But yeah, so that's it, Colin. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. There's another extension out there somewhat recently. So I looked, and Better PHP Unit is pretty popular. It's like the second most popular one. And so I went back and I saw a new one and I was like, oh, I shouldn't be partial to my tool. I should try this other tool and see if it's good, because it had some other features like a GUI in the sidebar, and it would show the status of all your tests running and cool stuff like that I'd kind of wanted in Better PHP Unit. And I pulled it down, and it's just everything else is slower because it relies on a separate language server. And mine just runs your test not in your terminal, but from a terminal session. So it's just as fast as typing PHP Unit in your terminal. So doesn't work with Docker. Oh, the other ones don't, you're saying? Because I bet Better PHP Unit does, right? Yeah, Better PHP Unit supports Homestead and Docker and all sorts of remote test stuff that I never use, but enough people do that I just pulled in the code for that. So how hard did you find writing your first extension for VS Code? Oh, it's great and it's horrible. Better than Sublime because I don't have to use Python. It's JavaScript, which is great. But what doesn't work with Docker says, sorry for jumping around. Other ones don't work with Docker. Sorry, other test runners. But yeah, authoring of your own VS Code extension seems easy and is in some ways, but the docs are god awful. It's an extremely annoying experience, and publishing it requires you to navigate Microsoft's heinous login system. I think I have 3 different accounts somewhere buried in Microsoft between like Xbox, Azure, Microsoft Office, and who knows what. And I can never even log into the right one. I literally created a package the other day. I couldn't publish it. I couldn't do it. I got into an account, and I even got an access code to put into the terminal thing, and I couldn't get it to work. So that's the status of publishing an extension. I will say, once you get used to it, you can do basic stuff pretty easily. And I love that it is just JavaScript, and developing the extension locally and testing it is so nice. And Better PHP Unit is actually all tested. So like when I'm developing it, I hit this play button in the debugger, and VS Code like runs through this whole test suite and actually like does stuff in a live editor, like a dusk test, and asserts things in the editor. It's really fancy. But I encourage you to try writing your own VS Code extension. A couple people told me that they would buy the course if I had an extension authoring section. which is sort of advanced content, and I think it's a small crew of people, but I want to do it just for like just to shout out into the void how frustrating it is to do and to make it a little bit easier for people. So hopefully I'll have something that's like how to make extensions without pulling your hair out. Okay, sounds awesome. What strategy did you use to gain 280 plus sponsors on GitHub? I think you might have missed the beginning there, Astrator. This was easier because of your large following on Twitter. Definitely easier because of large following on Twitter, but I basically offered people value. I made stuff that people thought was really cool, and I told them that they had to sponsor me to get it, and then they sponsored me. That's basically the short of it.
So I encourage you to write about Xdebug in VS Code in your email.
Yeah, there is a handful of posts from the Titan blog. Jose Soto, he wrote a blog post. He wrote a blog post on getting Xdebug set up with VS Code. I used it to get set up. I will say that I recently had to like get it reset up, and I think the blog post might be a little bit out of date with the way like extensions work in the latest PHP version with Peckle. I don't know, but it felt like I had to kind of improvise a bit on my own. I don't know if it's just because my own setup's weird or because the post is a little bit out of date, but I would start there. That's a good place to start.
In PHP Magazine, he wrote about VS Code and PHP. So you should talk to him, but doing a follow-up.
Oh,
Get
interesting.
yourself in the magazine.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that I initially wasn't going to market it to PHP developers, and after talking to Adam Wathen, who's much smarter at all this stuff than me, he had he's like, dude, everybody who's going to buy your course is a PHP developer, and you'd be an idiot if you didn't say VS Code for PHP. And I'm like, but it's only one chapter, and he's like, still VS Code for PHP. So maybe that'll be the title. Who knows? But it'll definitely cover all the things that need to be covered on PHP in VS Code.
Well, you've got a lot going on.
Yep. But I like it that way. That's partially why normal employment doesn't fit as well for me. It's nice to do a bunch of things at once. Makes me happy.
Well, you took the leap. You were very brave.
Yeah, well, thanks. I don't know if I would describe it like that, but I'll take it.
I'm a pretty hardcore PHP Storm user. I like it a lot. I just I substitute I sacrifice my RAM to it, right?
Right.
And I was curious. I mean, like, I think did you ever use PHP Storm?
Yeah, not heavily enough to accurately contest it.
Okay.
And like I said, it's one of those, Daniel and I joke about this a lot, that we're VS Code users that are really nervous about pairing with PHP Storm users, because if like you see some of the stuff we do, you'd be like, are you kidding me? You live like this? So I get it. I get that it's a slippery slope. I bet if I get into it, I wouldn't get out of it.
I go back and forth between VS Code a lot of the time with some of the teams I work with. They use VS Code, and other times it's PHP Storm. So I feel like I am pretty, what's the word, bilingual, I suppose.
I don't know. The grunts you've made when you've accidentally hit Command-Shift-O and it's not doing an open file, man. You're like, what is this?
Yeah, but I get it. I don't know. I think I'm okay. Anyways, so we're going to be giving away the 2 licenses to any JetBrains IDE, 2 licenses or 2 vouchers for Caleb's upcoming VS Code ebook, and also 2 vouchers for Caleb's upcoming VS Code screencast series. And there we go. All right. Thanks again for letting us do that, Bob.
Thank you. So, Caleb, do you have any final thoughts you want to convey?
I don't think I do. Maybe if anybody is interested in following along with things, Twitter is the most consistent place to do that. But other than that, I got nothing. I really appreciate you guys having me and letting me talk into this microphone. Thanks a lot. I loved it.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we're learning, and thank you for all the participation.